Hey y'all, welcome to Peyton Energetics. I'm Peyton, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about one of the most common starseed races, and that is Pleiadian starseeds. Now, if you've seen my videos, you know we have talked about Pleiadian starseeds in the past, but today we're going to dive in much deeper than we ever have before. And we're going to continue this with each of the different starseed races because, as y'all know, I am a Pleiadian channel. So I work very closely with guides who are from the Pleiades. And they've been giving us more and more information to help us understand the starseed races so that we can relate to each other more easily here as we do our ascension work for the planet. And one of the reasons that we tend to talk about Pleiadians and Pleiadian starseeds a lot in the spiritual community is because they're everywhere. The guides tell us that there are something like more than 200 million Pleiadian starseeds. So Pleiadian starseeds are everywhere. If you are not one yourself, you probably know one. You may be married to a Pleiadian starseed, or you may be raising one. So it's always helpful to learn about all of the different star races and what their starseeds are like to help us as we are all on this common starseed journey of helping Earth through the ascension process. So in today's video, we are going to be taking a deep look at Pleiadian starseeds and the Pleiadians themselves. We are going to take a look at what the star race itself is like to help us understand our star family. So today we will be separating fact from fiction as it comes to Pleiadian starseeds. We will be taking a look at some of the common traits of Pleiadian starseeds, and we're also going to take a look at what I like to think of as the myths of Pleiadian starseeds. Some of those things that people misunderstand or have a wrong impression about. So we're going to separate fact from fiction today as it concerns Pleiadian starseeds. Now, there's another reason why we talk about the Pleiadians so much in the spiritual community. And one of the reasons is they're one of our star ancestors that has the most involvement with us here on Earth. So unlike some of our star family who take a fairly hands-off approach when it comes to working with humans, the Pleiadians are not like that. They have been one of our more hands-on star ancestors, and they're also one of the top nominees to be the first star race to make open contact with us. So if you are someone who is excited about contact and disclosure, the Pleiadians, according to the guides, are at the top of the list of star races who we will meet first. And one of the reasons for that, according to the guides, is they're one of our star ancestors who look most like us. So the theory in the galactic community, and this is changing all the time, nothing is written in stone. So this is just probabilities that we're talking about here. But the Pleiadians, especially the fifth density Pleiadians, are very likely to be the first of our star family that we meet because they look most like us. So there is always a concern in the galactic community with not scaring new civilizations that are just opening up to galactic contact. And as Earth, as you have probably heard, the window for open contact opens in 2023. So it is here. And so we are looking to see which of our galactic family members will be the first to make contact with us. And the fifth density Pleiadians are already doing that. And so this is one of the reasons why the Pleiadians are very important to us here on Earth, both because there are so many starseeds incarnated right now, but also because the Pleiadians themselves are one of our closest star ancestors. So that is one of the reasons that we do focus a lot on the Pleiadians in the spiritual community. So before we dive into talking about Pleiadian starseeds, let's take a minute to talk about the Pleiadians themselves. So when we talk about the Pleiadians, of course, you know, we're talking about the Pleiades star cluster. And In that star cluster, the guides tell us there are actually thousands of stars. So this is a massive star system we are talking about. Even though there are only a handful that are visible to the naked eye from parts of our world, this is actually a vast star system. So within the Pleiadian system, there are thousands, and I think my guides have told me there are tens of thousands of races. So whenever we talk about the Pleiadians, we're not just talking about a single type of being. Now, we tend to speak in general terms when we talk about any of our star ancestors, but it's always important for us to understand that our star family is as diverse as our human family. So not all Pleiadians are the same. The Pleiadians exist on many different stars, many different star systems. They exist at many different dimensional or density levels. So several of the Pleiadians that work a lot with humanity right now are the 9th dimensional Pleiadians you are probably familiar with, the 5th density Pleiadians you are probably familiar with, and the list goes on from there. So we're speaking only very generally when we talk about the Pleiadians, because that is like saying a human. Well, there's a lot of range when you talk about humans. There's even more when we talk about our star family. So when we talk about the Pleiadians, we tend to be talking, first off, about the humanoids. And again, not all Pleiadians are humanoids. And we are also often talking about those groups of Pleiadians that are working most closely with Earth. So that is kind of what we are talking about when we talk about the Pleiadians. Now, as a race, the Pleiadians are one of the younger members of our star family. They are younger than the Andromedans, say, the Arcturians, even the Sirians. So the Pleiadians are one of our younger family members in terms of galactic time, but they're also one of the races that has the most history with us here on Earth and the most current involvement with us here on Earth. The Pleiadians are often also known as the emissaries of the galaxy. So the Pleiadians tend to be the diplomats of the galaxy. They are very involved in supporting evolving civilizations. They are very involved in helping the spread of light in the galaxy, the spread of consciousness, and of keeping the records of the galaxy. So the Pleiadians are not wallflowers. They are not ones to stay at home. They are very involved with galactic goings-on. So because the Pleiadians have, throughout Earth's history, been very involved with the planet Earth and the evolution of the human species, they are one of these starseed groups that is most common here on Earth. In fact, my guides generally say that there are more Pleiadian starseeds than any other type of starseed. And one of the reasons for that is because the Pleiadians themselves were so involved with planet Earth throughout its history. According to the guides, the genetics of the Pleiadians are much closer to human genetics than that of most of our star family. So for that reason, it is easier for Pleiadians to incarnate into human bodies. So that may be one of the reasons why we see more Pleiadian starseeds than some of the other star races that are not as good of a genetic fit in the human body. And according to my guides, most of the Pleiadian starseeds will come from 2 Pleiadian star systems. The first is Alcyone. That is the central sun of the Pleiades, and many of our starseeds come from Alcyone. And the second most common system to send starseeds to Earth, according to my guides, is Taygeta. So we will tend to see a lot of Pleiadian starseeds coming from those 2 star systems. And most of the guides that I work with come from Alcyone. So you will notice a perspective or a slant in that direction with the information that I bring through. But Taygetan is also a very common starseed origin point for a lot of Pleiadian starseeds. So let's talk a little now about Pleiadian starseeds. Now that you have kind of a general overview of the Pleiadians themselves, what are Pleiadian starseeds like? Now, there are certain trends in Pleiadian starseeds. So there are certain traits, certain characteristics that pop up very often in Pleiadian starseeds. So we're going to take a look at some of those more common trends in today's video, but just keep in mind that starseeds are as unique as we are as humans. And so you may be a Pleiadian starseed and not have any of these traits, and that is perfectly fine. So what we are talking about here is what I think of as trends, or things that occur more often in Pleiadian starseeds than we might see in the general human population. But just keep in mind, everyone is unique. So you may resonate with some of these, or you may resonate with none of them. And that's absolutely perfect. Always let your intuition be your guide. Now, one of the first things that comes to my mind when I think about common personality traits that many Pleiadian starseeds share is Pleiadian starseeds are freedom lovers. We tend to be starseeds who hate any sort of authority, any sort of control, any sort of structure. So Pleiadian starseeds may hate to be locked down in a 9-to-5 job. They have, in general, you may notice with Pleiadian starseeds, a dislike of any form of authority. So your Pleiadian starseeds are often not going to thrive in very rigid or structured environments. So following a lot of rules, generally not something that is going to appeal to a Pleiadian starseed. So again, they may go to certain lengths to avoid 9-to-5 jobs, anything with a lot of bureaucracy or red tape or following rules for the sake of following rules tends to make a Pleiadian's skin crawl. So Pleiadian starseeds, you may notice being very distrustful of authority and anything that infringes on their personal freedom. So Pleiadian starseeds tend to be all about the freedom. Now, something else that you may notice about Pleiadian starseeds is that Pleiadian starseeds tend to be very loving and heart-centered. So Pleiadian starseeds may be some of the kindest, most compassionate people that you meet. And this is something that is very common in the Pleiadians themselves. They are all about the love. They are all about harmony, about supporting everyone, about treating everyone equally. This is something that is very important to Pleiadian starseeds. And so along these lines, Pleiadian starseeds will very often go to great lengths to avoid any sort of drama. They are not into drama. They are not into conflict. It can even be something that is very upsetting to their physical bodies. I know when I was a child, any sort of conflict would physically make me sick. It was something that was so overwhelming to me, so foreign to me, that my whole body rejected it. So this is something that is a very common trend among Pleiadian starseeds, is we're not good with the conflict and the drama. So if you are a Pleiadian starseed, or if you know one, and chances are that you do, this is something that you may notice, that these are the friends, the family members that are the peacekeepers. They want harmony for everyone. They want kumbaya for everyone. They do not want any sort of conflict or drama. It can be very upsetting to Pleiadians. Now, something else that goes along with this is that Pleiadian starseeds and the Pleiadians themselves are known to be very emotional. So the Pleiadians, when I work with my guides, they talk about the scale of emotion among various star races. And the Pleiadians like to kind of compare it and consider themselves to be one of the most emotional of the star races. Whereas they will compare themselves sometimes to the Arcturians or the Andromedans and consider those races to be very logical. And on the other hand, the Pleiadians will often refer to themselves as being extremely emotional. They live from the heart. And so this is something that you may see carrying over in Pleiadian starseeds, that they may be very sensitive, very emotional, very operating from the heart. This is something that the Pleiadians and many Pleiadian starseeds are very much known for. And along with this, and along with that dislike of anything that is conflict, that is drama, Pleiadian starseeds tend to be extremely non-confrontational. So we are not starseeds who are prone to be activists. And this can stretch out into being a problem for some Pleiadian starseeds, that they keep the peace at all costs, even if it means suppressing emotions or not saying things that need to be said. So this is something that can be the Achilles heel of Pleiadian starseeds, that they put avoiding conflict above everything else. So one of the things that we have to watch as Pleiadian starseeds is that we are not bottling up our emotions, because this is something that can be an issue for Pleiadian starseeds, is trying to keep the peace, trying to make everyone happy, being people pleasers, and that can have the extreme sometimes of bottling things inside. So that is something that can be something that Pleiadian starseeds may need to keep an eye on. Now, something else that goes along with the Pleiadian starseeds being natural peacekeepers is they're also perfectionists. So this may be something that you notice in the Pleiadian starseeds, is that there's a tendency toward perfectionism. Because again, Pleiadians like everything to be beautiful, everything to be perfect, everyone to be happy. And so there can be a tendency among Pleiadian starseeds toward perfectionism. Now, we talked about Pleiadian starseeds and how they will tend to avoid drama and conflict. That is something that is very, very common in Pleiadian starseeds. But that doesn't mean that Pleiadians sweep everything under the rug. We do have to keep an eye on that because there can be a tendency to do that. But one way that this shows up in Pleiadian starseeds is that Pleiadian starseeds can be very intolerant of injustice. Again, because they value love, community, everyone getting along, everyone being treated equally. That Pleiadians can be very intolerant of injustice, of oppression, of any sort of violence against other people or other beings. Anything that falls in that category of infringing on the freedom of others or not treating others with the love and respect that you would want to be treated with can be very off-putting to Pleiadian starseeds, because again, they are all about the love. They're all about harmony. So often Pleiadian starseeds will very much have a zero tolerance policy for cruelty. That may mean that they can't watch movies or videos, anything that has violence, oppression, anything like that is going to very often be a complete deal breaker to a Pleiadian starseed. So Pleiadian starseeds are often the humanitarians. They are the ones who are trying to help everyone and make sure that everyone is thriving. But they tend to do that in a more subdued way. Like we said, Pleiadian starseeds tend not to be activists. So they tend not to be in any position of forceful opposition to things, but that doesn't mean that they are wallflowers. So Pleiadian starseeds are often very active in undermining authority, any form of control, any form of injustice. They just do it cleverly. They do it quietly. So the Pleiadian starseed may be the starseed who is working very actively to oppose systems of injustice, oppression, inequality, but you don't necessarily know they're doing it because they're doing it in a very harmonious way. So your Pleiadian starseed is going to break down systems of oppression using logic and better suggestions and better ways to do things, as opposed to being that hammer, that activist, that one who is in your face telling you you're wrong. Pleiadians are going to play it a little more smoothly. So they, again, are going to often be very active in countering anything that they see that is unjust, anything that is oppressive, but you just may see them doing it with a smile. They tend to be ones who undermine authority in a way that the authority doesn't realize it's being undermined. And some other things that are often used to describe Pleiadian starseeds is they're often described as being very independent. So your Pleiadian starseed is not one to follow the crowd, not one to do what anyone else is doing for the sake of conformity. Pleiadian starseeds tend to be very independent. They march to the beat of their own drum, and they have no trouble bucking the system, going against the norm, doing the unexpected. They are also known to be very inquisitive, very curious. So Pleiadians want to understand how things work and how they can make them better. And they're also known for being extremely considerate. So Pleiadians tend to be ones who always treat others the way they want to be treated. So it can be very baffling to Pleiadian starseeds when they see people treating each other with cruelty, when they see injustice or inequality, because the Pleiadian starseed, coming from a star system that is so based in love, so based in unity consciousness, can struggle to understand why humans treat each other the way they do, because Pleiadian starseeds know that there's a better way. So it can be very hard for Pleiadian starseeds. I have heard a lot of them say that they consider humans to be barbaric because they just don't understand why anyone would do things to another that they wouldn't want done to themselves. So this can be a struggle for Pleiadian starseeds, and why they have just no patience with treating people cruelly, dishonesty, oppression, inequality. All of that is going to be very off-putting to your average Pleiadian starseed. Now, let's talk a little bit about Pleiadians and how they fit into the human body. Because if you have seen any of my starseed videos, you know that one of the things that is very common in starseeds of all star races is a struggle with the physical body. And so what that means is that when starseeds incarnate here on Earth, being in a physical body can be very, very challenging. And this tends to be worse for certain star races than it is with others. And my guides like to say that starseeds from Andromeda and from Arcturus can have particular struggles with being in a physical body. So I always like to, in these starseed videos, share what my guides are telling me in terms of giving some pointers to help starseeds fit more comfortably in their human body. So when we talk about Pleiadian starseeds in particular, the guides say Pleiadian starseeds tend to fit into their human bodies more comfortably than some of the other star races. So Pleiadian starseeds may not have the same number of struggles with the physical body as some other star races. And according to the guides, one of the reasons for that is the Pleiadians have had such a heavy presence on the planet throughout Earth's history. So what that means, according to the guides, is their genetics are already on the planet. And again, many of the Pleiadian races that are humanoid and still in physical form very closely resemble Earth humans. So because of the genetic similarities, or what the guides consider to be frequency compatibilities, Pleiadian starseeds tend to have a little easier time in the physical body. But still, compared to the average human population, being in a physical body can still be a challenge for Pleiadian starseeds. Now, according to the guides, some of the things that you may notice about being in a physical body, if you are a Pleiadian starseed, or if you know one, are that Pleiadian starseeds often do better on vegetarian diets. And so they are one of the star races that may do better with less meat in the diet or no meat in the diet. And again, this traces back to the Pleiadians themselves. And as the fifth density Pleiadians like to say, most advanced civilizations don't eat meat or meat products. So the Pleiadians are no different. And because of that, it may mean that if you are a Pleiadian starseed, a more plant-based diet, a more vegetarian diet may be beneficial to you. But again, none of these factors mean that this will apply to everyone. So always use your intuition, your judgment, your discernment. before you implement any changes to your diet. Diet, of course, is very, very personal. So Pleiadian starseeds may do better on a more plant-based diet. And something else that the guides say can be beneficial to many Pleiadian starseeds is minimal processed foods. So Pleiadians may tend to do better on a more natural, more organic, more whole food diet, and less well on anything that is processed, filled with chemicals, all those things that we kind of know with our common sense, but this can be very true with Pleiadian starseeds as well. Now, something else that may be a factor with Pleiadian starseeds is they may have lower blood pressure and lower body temperature than the average person. So this is something that you may notice if you are a Pleiadian starseed. And Pleiadian starseeds in particular, more than some of the other starseed races, may have sensitivities to food. They may be prone to allergies, food sensitivities, having to be very careful with their diet. This is something that is very common. It's a trend among Pleiadian starseeds and something that is very common. Something else that you may notice about Pleiadian starseeds, if you look at their energy, is you may notice that they have a turquoise or a blue energy field, a blue aura. So that is something that may help you figure out if someone you know or you yourself are a Pleiadian starseed. Something else that is very common as we talk about Pleiadian starseeds and the physical body, Pleiadian starseeds tend to be hypersensitive. Now, when we talk about starseeds, you know we have talked in many videos about how starseeds in general tend to be very sensitive, very empathic, and very intuitive. But I would place Pleiadian starseeds in the hypersensitivity end of the scale. So if you are a Pleiadian starseed, you may be much more sensitive than even the other starseeds that you know. So this sensitivity may extend not only to food, as we talked about, but Pleiadian starseeds may find that they're extremely sensitive to EMFs. So to the frequencies of our technologies. Pleiadians can be exceptionally sensitive to this. And this is something that I am noticing myself firsthand as a Pleiadian starseed. I have to be very careful with my cell phone. I have to pretty much have it turned off or have it far away from my body because I am too sensitive to the radiation. So if you are a starseed, I just throw that out. Again, it doesn't mean that everyone will have that, but Pleiadians tend to have hypersensitive bodies. They may also find that they are extremely sensitive to environmental energies. So this may mean that you are extremely sensitive to solar energies. And we have been getting pounded with solar energies over the past year. There are solar flares, solar flashes all the time. And if you are a Pleiadian starseed, you may be able to feel those when they happen. So you may be very sensitive to solar energy. You may be very sensitive to the Schumann resonance. All of this is extremely common in Pleiadian starseeds because, again, Pleiadian starseeds tend to come in at the hypersensitive end of the scale. So if you are a Pleiadian starseed, let me know in the comments if that is you. And while you're down there, don't forget, hit the subscribe button and the like button if you haven't done that yet. So along with this extreme sensitivity or hypersensitivity that many Pleiadian starseeds have, Pleiadian starseeds can struggle with the nervous system. So finding ways to calm the nervous system, settle the nervous system can be very important if you're a Pleiadian starseed. So making sure that you have practices to ground your energy that work for you as a starseed, because so many starseeds need special tools to really feel their best in their physical bodies. So Pleiadians are high on the list of starseeds who need extra support with the physical body. So this sensitivity takes many forms in Pleiadian starseeds. It can even extend to things like extreme sensitivity to noise. You may notice that you can't be in large crowds or noisy situations, that it just overwhelms you energetically. So that is something else that is very common with hypersensitive Pleiadian starseeds. Now, let's talk for a minute about some things that can be helpful to Pleiadian starseeds, to feeling better in their body, to just living more comfortably, because as starseeds, we are always looking for that. Some things that Pleiadian starseeds may benefit from. First of all, personal space. Pleiadian starseeds are often not really that into having people up close in their space. So unlike some star races, say our Sirian starseed friends who tend to like being very close to other people, Pleiadian starseeds tend to need a lot of room. So we don't necessarily like to have people up in our grill. We like to have a nice buffer of energy because, again, it goes back to that Pleiadian sensitivity. So personal space can be very helpful to Pleiadian starseeds. And Pleiadian starseeds may also need more peace and quiet than the average starseed. And again, this goes back to that sensitivity that Pleiadian starseeds need to take care of their nervous systems. So having time away from crowds to recharge, away from noise. Pleiadian starseeds may benefit from working from home more than other starseeds who may need that close interaction with other people. Pleiadian starseeds are often not like that. They tend to thrive doing their own thing in their own space and being able to get away from the energy of other people. So if you are a Pleiadian starseed, that is something that might help you. And some other things that might benefit Pleiadian starseeds are being around nature and animals. Pleiadian starseeds are notorious lovers of animals and of nature. So if you are a Pleiadian starseed, handling your extreme sensitivity can be helped by spending time with nature and with animals. So that is something that is very near and dear to most Pleiadian starseeds, is our animal friends and getting out in nature however we can. And something else that can be very beneficial to Pleiadian starseeds is to develop your intuitive abilities, because Pleiadian starseeds tend to be highly psychic. So if you are someone who is a Pleiadian starseed, it could be very helpful to you to get some intuitive training to help you reconnect with your intuitive gifts. Because again, Pleiadian starseeds are very often highly intuitive and very psychically active. So you may find that you are telepathic. You may find that you have excellent clairvoyance or clairaudience. These are all things that Pleiadian starseeds tend to be very naturally gifted at. So as a Pleiadian starseed, looking into developing those abilities can be very helpful and a great way to start connecting with your Pleiadian star family as well. And finally, some of the other things that come to mind when I think of trends that I see in Pleiadian starseeds. Again, Pleiadian starseeds are independent. They tend not to follow the crowd. They are immune to peer pressure. They are those starseeds who are going to do what they want to do. They also tend to be free thinkers. They love to explore. They love to try new things. And they can have a slight tendency toward being stubborn. But oftentimes that's because of their hypersensitivity. They can see things that the average human can't see. So those are some of the main things that you will see in many, again, not all, Pleiadian starseeds, and some of the things you can look to if you are curious if you are a Pleiadian starseed yourself. And again, just run each of these things through your intuition. If it is relevant to you, your intuition will let you know. So now that we have talked a little bit about some of the characteristics of Pleiadian starseeds, let's talk for a minute about what Pleiadian energy feels like. Because again, maybe you will notice this energy in someone you know, which will help you tell if they are a Pleiadian starseed. So each of our star races, the energy of those races or those beings can feel very different. And no one reads energy exactly the same way. But I notice in a lot of my friends and clients that I have introduced to my Pleiadian guides, they tend to describe Pleiadian energy similarly. So if you are curious what Pleiadian energy feels like, a lot of times people describe it as being very energizing. So Pleiadian energy to a human may feel very buzzy, And I've had some friends describe it as electrical or zappy or tingly. So if you are someone who notices these energies, then that may be a sign to you that you are with a Pleiadian starseed or that you are working with Pleiadian guides. So this is something that I have heard a lot of people describe Pleiadian energy that way. So I just wanted to share that as we're all starting to connect more with our galactic families. So knowing what to look for in the energies as an energy signature can be very helpful. So look for Pleiadian energy to feel very energizing. So as compared to some of our star family who has very soothing energy, very calming, like maybe the Arcturians, Pleiadian energy seems to be energy. So that is something you can look for if you are curious, if you are meeting with Pleiadian starseeds, connecting with them, whether you are one yourself or whether you just have Pleiadian guides. Now, there's something else that is somewhat unique about the energy of Pleiadian starseeds, and that is that the energy of Pleiadian starseeds can be very strong to the average person. So this is something that I did not know until one of my friends commented on my energy. And what I noticed with this girlfriend was that every time I was around her, she had to take a step or two back, or she'd sit next to me, then immediately get up and move 2 chairs away. And I couldn't figure out what she was doing. And she didn't know she was doing it. But one day we caught eyes and she realized what she was doing. And she looked at me, she's like, "I'm so sorry." She's like, "Your energy just makes me dizzy." And I had never heard anyone say that before, but now other people have told me the same thing. So if you are a Pleiadian starseed, or if you know one, you may notice that their energy is very strong, especially for the average human and even for more grounded starseeds. So Pleiadian energy, again, this is something that can happen. It doesn't always happen. It can be a little overwhelming to certain other types of energy. So I always like to throw that out because it's one of those kind of fun, quirky, random things that came up where I got feedback on what my Pleiadian energy feels like to non-Pleiadians. Now that we have talked about some of the traits and characteristics of Pleiadian starseeds, let's talk for a moment about some of the struggles of Pleiadian starseeds. Because as starseeds, we all have our own unique struggles that come from holding this high starseed frequency that we incarnated with. And every star race can have its own strengths and its own weaknesses. So Pleiadians are no different. We have our own struggles. Some of those we have already talked about, which is the hypersensitivity. This can be a problem for Pleiadian starseeds. So learning how to control your sensitivity and turn it into a gift is really worth your time if you are a Pleiadian starseed. So one of the first things that I would list as a struggle that Pleiadian starseeds may encounter is dealing with their sensitivity, whether that is sensitivity in the body, sensitivity to emotions, not liking conflict, avoiding drama, keeping the peace, is something that Pleiadian starseeds may need to keep an eye on. Now, something else that Pleiadian starseeds can struggle with is being people pleasers. And again, this goes back to wanting to keep the peace. So Pleiadian starseeds can lose their boundaries in the name of keeping everyone happy. So one of the things that Pleiadian starseeds may struggle with is boundaries, is being people pleasers. And part of this equation is they can also struggle with negative emotions. So the Pleiadians themselves as a race have described to us how this was one of the big struggles the Pleiadians themselves ran into as they moved through their evolutionary process. They refused to look at the dark. They only wanted to see love and light. And as we know, as citizens of a dualistic universe, everything has to be integrated. So one thing that really bit the Pleiadians themselves in the butt by their own description is refusing to look at their shadow, refusing to confront their own darkness. And this caused all sorts of headaches in the Pleiadian system, and they had their own major catastrophes that came out of this. So as Pleiadian starseeds, we carry that energy in us, that old trauma. And so one of the things that it's always good for Pleiadian starseeds to keep an eye on is that we're dealing with our own shadow, that we're dealing with our negative emotions and not just hiding it or avoiding it. Because again, that is an energy that we have inherited. And again, it probably is something that the whole human population has inherited, because so many of us have Pleiadian energy. But if you are a Pleiadian starseed, especially if you have a large percentage of Pleiadian energy, this is really something to keep an eye on and make sure that you are doing that shadow work and being open about who you are, because another way this can play out for Pleiadian starseeds in a way that's not helpful is not being our authentic self, because again, that people pleasing. So this is a really big thing for Pleiadian starseeds to keep an eye on and make sure we're dealing authentically with our emotions and sharing those with other people and not just focused on the love and the light, because there's a very strong tendency to that in many Pleiadian starseeds. And along with this, something else that is very common in Pleiadian starseeds that can be a struggle is low self-esteem. This is something that Pleiadian starseeds are notorious for, and also something that comes up a lot with Pleiadian starseeds that I work with is Pleiadians can carry a lot of abandonment energy and betrayal energy. And again, this is energy that has been inherited. It has been passed down through our star race, our star ancestry, but it can be very heavy in Pleiadian starseeds. So again, doing that shadow work, dealing with your negative emotions can help Pleiadian starseeds overcome some of these struggles, because again, we can carry a lot of the scars from some of the galactic traumas that have occurred. The Pleiadians were very involved in many terrible galactic wars, and they saw terrible things happen. And so because of that, as Pleiadian starseeds, we carry that trauma signature. So working with that, releasing that can be very, very important for Pleiadian starseeds. And again, watching the self-esteem, the low self-esteem can be very common with many Pleiadian starseeds as well. And finally, we've talked about some of the struggles Pleiadians can have with the physical body. And one of those things that Pleiadians can struggle with, Pleiadian starseeds, is not handling stress well. And again, it is because Pleiadians want to be all love and light, focused on the good stuff, and we tend to, as starseeds, not be great at handling our stress. So that is something, again, if you're a Pleiadian starseed, you might just want to keep your eye on and make sure you have good energy practices and really benefit from energy protection tools, making sure they're protecting that very sensitive energy field and making sure they stay very grounded. Because again, this is something that is not natural for Pleiadian starseeds. We want to be high vibration, out of our body. Being in the physical body is not always where we want to be. So making sure, if you are a Pleiadian starseed, that you are nice and grounded can be really important. It can help you deal with a lot of that sensitivity that you are probably dealing with if you are a Pleiadian starseed. And finally, to wrap up our chat about Pleiadian starseeds, let's talk about some of the myths of Pleiadian starseeds. And two things kind of come to mind that I see people maybe misunderstanding about Pleiadian starseeds in particular. And the first is that all Pleiadian starseeds are blonde, that they are all Nordic in appearance. And I talked to the Pleiadians themselves, the guides, my team, and asked them, why is this a myth? Why do so many people think that all Pleiadians are blonde? And what the Pleiadians said is there is a reason for that. And that is that every star race that has been present on the planet Earth, lived in certain areas when they were there. And their genetics are very mixed in with certain parts of the human population. So for that reason, star races, even though they will incarnate into every human race, so there are Pleiadian starseeds that look like every possibility of a human, Pleiadians may, like every star race, concentrate in higher numbers in certain places of the world. And that is because, according to the guides, this is where there is the best genetic compatibility, the best frequency compatibility. So according to the guides, when the Pleiadians were on Earth, they colonized certain parts of Northern Europe. So that is why Pleiadians can very often incarnate into human bodies that look Caucasian, because that is one of the places on our globe where the Pleiadians settled when they had colonies on Earth. So their genetics are a good match for the humans in that part of the world. But again, as the Pleiadians like to point out, they also colonized many of the indigenous populations, and many of our indigenous populations have very strong Pleiadian connections. So you will see very strong Pleiadian representation in areas with strong indigenous cultures. So again, the Pleiadians, the myth number one is they are not all blonde, all Pleiadian starseeds. But that is a trend that you will see. It is a thing for a reason that you will see very many Pleiadian starseeds are blonde, but you will also see many with dark hair, dark skin, and you will see Pleiadian starseeds everywhere. And myth number two about Pleiadian starseeds is they are all love and light. They are all sweet and loving. And while yes, to a large extent that is true about many Pleiadian starseeds are also warriors. We come from a star race of warriors and explorers. So we are all love and sweetness until we're pushed, and then the warrior comes out. So this is something that kind of makes me laugh when I see it in represented in the spiritual community, because yes, Pleiadians are known for their loving nature, for being very heart-centered, but don't forget they are also warriors. So Pleiadians are very sweet and kind until you push them, and then you will see a very different side. So those are the two things that I like to throw out as what I see as myths or misunderstandings about Pleiadian starseeds. But let me know, what do you see as a misunderstanding of Pleiadian starseeds? Or what have I left off my list about the Pleiadians? Let me know if you are a Pleiadian starseed or if you know one. Drop that in the comments below. And while you're down there, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. I'll see you soon. Bye.